Coming up, war on warming, the junk science between the lines of the anti-pipeline crowd's agenda. This week, we've spent a lot of time covering the scourge of foreign activists fighting against the Northern Gateway Pipeline. You know the politics, you know the economics, you know the legal issues, but how about the science? Look, every infrastructure project needs to have an environmental assessment. Progress and development need to be responsible. That's not my issue here. It's the interference of the global warming movement. It's one thing to worry about keeping our drinking water clean, our oceans free of oil spills, but to say this pipeline will add to global warming, how ridiculous. Canada produces 2% of the world's carbon emissions, even with our supposedly vast, dirty oil sands. How will moving that oil from one place to another turn our planet into a convection oven? Please. A huge chunk of this massive list of over 4,500 people who want to speak, they're not interested in truly sustainable development. Their faith-based religion, which is launching this inquisition, they just want the oil sands to die. For more on the activist agenda and whether or not they have the goods to back it up, let's turn to Tom Harris of the International Climate Science Coalition. Tom, who exactly are the people we're dealing with here, and what do they want us to believe?
Well, there's all kinds of interests on the surface that seem to be driving. There's a lot of attention right now on Native people, although we're finding that a fair bit of the funding that's going to help the Native people actually testify is coming from American foundations who are really interested in climate change. And it's interesting, the very first thing out of David Suzuki's mouth this morning on Canada, CBC AM actually out of Vancouver, was his resistance or his opposition to the pipeline was because he was opposed to oil sands because they're causing a climate catastrophe. So just like the Keystone XL pipeline in the U.S., the climate crisis, or supposed climate crisis, is what's driving a lot of the opposition to the pipeline.
Well, David, I got to tell you, Tom, I'm thinking David Suzuki. I appreciate this, Tom. I appreciate that David Suzuki is out of the closet on this.
Yeah.
I mean, he's out of the closet. He's shown his cards. He wants to pose an existential threat to the oil sands. He wants them shut down. Everything else is just a sideshow.
Yeah.
That's what this isn't about. This isn't about the integrity of pipelines and whether or not Enbridge can build a pipeline. It's not about the water and the air and the little furry animals. This is about shutting down the sands, and now you've got David Suzuki, as of this morning, confessing that that's all it's about.
Well, right after the Keystone XL pipeline was shelved, 350.org and the other climate activists who were the main drivers of the opposition to the Keystone XL, they announced that Gateway was their next target. And so while on the surface, some of them are complaining about, possibilities of leak or things like that, and those are valid concerns, but, my assessment of the Enbridge work in this area is that so far it's been very, very good. Now, we'll know for sure because throughout the hearings, we're going to hear from the experts at all kinds of regulatory agencies in the Canadian government. So the kind of concerns that we're hearing mostly, the danger of tanker traffic through the fjords, danger of leakage of the pipeline as they go through the Rockies. And by the way, Kinder Morgan has been running a pipeline very similar to this from the Edmonton area to Vancouver for 60 years, and they've had essentially no safety problems at all. So there's a very strong precedent that's already been set for the strong safety of these things. But, I think that what people in the public should do, who are not experts in any of the areas that are being brought up, is wait to see what the experts actually say. Because this kind of a pipeline is basically regulated to an unbelievable extent. I mean, the federal agencies that are involved in regulating, you've got the National Energy Board, Fisheries and Oceans, Department of Indian and Northern Affairs, Transport Canada, Environment Canada, Natural Resources Canada. These experts are going to appear before the commission, before the testimony hearing people, and, that's when we should really pay attention, because they will tell us what is the likelihood of a leak and how dangerous is it to move tankers through the fjords. Based on Norway's experience, who do that all the time, very similar transition of fuels from their coast to markets overseas, it's not a dangerous process. And they've done a lot of very good work that you can see on the Enbridge website, actually, where they've done simulations that show that this kind of transport, first, pipeline to the coast, the very safest way to get it there, and then from the coast to foreign markets, it actually looks very safe.
Tom, a quick prediction, if you could. We've only got a few seconds. In the end, whether it's another year, year and a half, 2 years, in the end, will the Northern Gateway Pipeline be built? Yes or no?
Yes, I think it will, because this panel that's actually looking at it, the Joint Review Panel, they are able to take a proper assessment and make a really serious decision to recommend to the government, independent of political pressures. Unlike the U.S., where it was very politically driven, I think they'll just say, yes, go ahead, it's in the national interest.
Tom, thank you, as always. Appreciate your expertise.
Thank you.
Tom Harris in Ottawa.